I began watching Invincible one day while browsing Amazon Prime looking for a new show. And the title card didn't seem all that interesting. It was just kind of like a boy in a super suit flying around. But I'd seen a lot of the memes. I'd watched Daniel Green's video, or at least some of it to avoid spoilers. And Castlevania Season 4 wasn't coming out for a few more days, so I thought, what the heck, I'll start a new show. And I watched the first episode that night. At the beginning, I was kind of nodding along as they went through familiar plot beats of a superhero society, two villains trying to break into the White House and kill the president, and there are some meta jokes about like, oh, I don't even think the president lives in the White House anymore. Some great world building on their part. But the characters were entertaining. It was your classic Justice League setup. But from the very start, I could sense something was wrong. Just from the way the Immortal reacted to Omni-Man flying overhead while they were fighting, I could tell they were a little bit uncomfortable with each other. But then we cut to our main character, Mark, living with his superpowered dad and a mom who seems fairly normal if very strong-willed. Now, the tone at the beginning of the show was fairly light. Superheroes are doing their superhero stuff, there's some darker undertones going on, but mostly it's all light high school action. The main character has a girl he likes, there's a bully he doesn't like, and the show seemed kind of balancing an atmosphere of the Justice League and the original Spider-Man movies, where Peter had his normal life at high school, and that seemed the direction they were going with Mark, and I was down for it. Even if it wasn't as entertaining as I thought some of the reviews made it out to be at first. Still thought it was pretty great. And nothing really changed. It was just kind of a regular high school superhero coming-of-age drama until we hit the 20-minute mark, where the whole show begins to take on a new tone. Now, these darker undertones have kind of been in the background the whole time, not really clashing with the coming-of-age, freedom, expression of powers and being a hero. They're not really clashing with that tone, just kind of mixing with it a little bit. But around the 20-minute mark, we begin to get a very clearly a darker tone. Omni-Man finds out Mark has gotten his powers, and you can immediately see that something goes wrong. Omni-Man's reaction seems a little bit off, and a lot of Omni-Man's lines seem a little off after this point. And with any other voice actor but J.K. Simmons, I would blame it on subpar voice acting, not adding the proper inflection. J.K. Simmons is a gift to this world. He has an incredible voice, so I knew he had to be doing it on purpose, and that started to give me my first clues towards the show's darker undertones. They begin their lessons, and at first it seems pretty normal. There's some great world building, explanation of powers, and then Omni-Man punches Mark. He hits him really hard. And there's some apologies tossed around, but you can tell that Omni-Man feels bad, but also not as bad as you would expect if this was an accident. But Omni-Man's voice really does begin to sound like, throughout the episode, that he's hiding something. Something's bothering him that he can't talk about. We see this whenever he confronts his wife and yells at her for the first time, and she asks him what his problem is. And I immediately knew I was going to like the mom's character going forward. But from that point on, you begin to feel a tonal shift in the show. Something's wrong with Omni-Man. He's beginning to emanate an aura of menace, as if like a bear that's been poked. You just start to see little things bothering him, little animated indicators that not everything is how it seems. And the writers do a great job of planting the seeds early on that not everyone's okay with Omni-Man. There's something a little off about this guy. You can tell it from the very beginning. And this is when you begin to sense the tonal dissonance that this show balances. Not a dissonance as in there's something wrong with the show, but an intentional dissonance between the levity coming of age tone that we see when Mark's at high school and the other tone, the darker undertone that something's wrong with Omni-Man. Something is wrong with this world. The place where I became fully aware of Invincible's incredible balancing of these two almost contradictory tones was when the main character, Mark, goes crime fighting for the first time, puts on a ramshackle costume, and begins to do battle. He grabs a rock guy, throws him around, and seems to be a hero. And then his dad shows up, and we feel the tone begin to shift from a levity coming of age, he was flying around having a good time, to it's time for the dad talk. And they go into a building, and Invincible's dad begins to have a kind of harsh conversation with him, criticizing him, saying, oh, you did way too much damage out there. I don't think you're ready for this. And the show does something very surprising, something I really like from this show. The main character just reaches deep down and opens up emotionally. He's emotionally honest with his dad. He says, look, hit me. And he's like, what? I'm not going to hit you. And he's like, no, hit me. Last time you hit me and I wasn't ready and it scared me, but now I'm ready. Hit me. I want to show you I'm ready. And of course, the dad's not going to hit him at this point. You get this sense that Mark is opening up emotionally, kind of bearing his soul to his dad, and his dad just kind of brushing him off. And it's not something you usually see in shows that have a light tone. It's bringing in that darker undertone that we begin to sense from the beginning, but then it begins to go away a little bit because the dad's like, you know what? I'm gonna introduce you to Art, another one of my favorite characters of the show. Art is this awesome costume designer for superheroes. Him and Mark go and they just start chatting up, and Art's also voiced by Mark Hamill, another great voice actor. I digress. Mark is introduced to Art, and the atmosphere becomes whimsical as they try on costumes, they discuss superhero names, they make some jokes about characters in the show. I was having such a good time, I almost began to forget about those darker undertones a little bit. I was like, oh, okay, maybe they'll just be undertones for a while, and they just kind of come to the surface every now and then. I could not have been more wrong, and more happy to be wrong. Then we cut straight to that night, where Mark's mom comes outside to see her son trying to land, ruining her garden, and tells him to come inside, and he says, make me. This was a masterful move on the writer's part. They set him up in a position where he's starting to already show that darker side of his dad within himself. And he challenges his mom, and his mom, of course, doesn't back down, which is one of the reasons she's my favorite character. She's one of my favorite characters in the show just because of how she handles it. She's like, does that make you feel strong? And she has a heart-to-heart conversation, and the tone shifts again from that darker kind of, Mark's having a standoff with his mom to they just kind of have a heart-to-heart, and the mom takes a lot of crap from Mark. After this point, there are only 2 more tone shifts in the show. After the kind of heart-to-heart moment with the mom and the kind of dark moment of him standing in his father's place, challenging his mother with his power, we get a happy superhero jaunt of Invincible flying through the sky over the city. He sees, he's having a great time. It's interrupted by a villain attack. He's beating up the villain, making funny quotes, and then right as he's about to say his superhero name, we cut to the title screen. The credits begin to roll, and we find ourselves with the last tonal shift. At this point, you can kind of say, oh, this is a jaunty show with dark undertones. And maybe later they'll explore them in later episodes. But in the first, if you just watch up until the credits start rolling, you see it as a light show with dark undertones, not a show that's balancing 2 tones and balancing them very well in later episodes, which I will get to in another episode of my own. And I was blindsided by how Omni-Man massacres the Guardians of the Globe. It was brutal. The entire sequence was visceral, horribly realistic. All these dark undertones come to a head as Omni-Man brutally kills every member of the Guardians of the Globe. And does so in one of the most well-choreographed fight scenes I've ever seen. I cannot stress this enough. That scene was incredible. I mean, if you don't like blood, it's not the scene for you. Every strike smacked of detail. The show is promising us more of these well-choreographed fight scenes. So much detail, so much love poured into this fight scene. It's kind of sick, but also really cool. And the show made one final promise to me as the episode actually closed. It was gonna pull no punches, physically, emotionally, or tonally. As the series went on, I found that these tones become more and more dramatic. I won't do spoilers for later episodes. I'll be covering them in later episodes of my own. But as the series unfolds, we get to see these dark undertones come to the surface and balance out with the light tones of high school and, Mark's discovering himself as a superhero. It's one of the things I like most about this series. One of the reasons I cannot recommend it enough if you don't mind blood, if you don't mind emotional trauma, as you will see if you did watch it and are watching these videos after the fact, you will know that it gets bad. But if you enjoy epic superhero fight scenes, they get even better as the series goes on. There's so many moments where I'm just like, wow, like their authors are pulling out all the stops, callbacks to older episodes. They managed to make threats feel real. And that was another thing I really liked, was how in that battle they showed Omni-Man's limitations. In the first episode, they've already told us that Omni-Man's going to be the antagonist by the end of that episode. He killed the Guardians of the Globe, the good guys, he's going to be the antagonist. But they also gave us a gift by showing us his limits. Unlike Superman, who goes down to a piece of kryptonite, Omni-Man can be physically beaten, even if it requires an extreme amount of force. So it gives us some hope. They lay the foundation really well for these next episodes. And episode 2, in my opinion, was even better than episode 1. Episode 1 had a lot of problems, I think, in the first 20 minutes. It didn't bring me into the world. I felt kind of bored for a lot of the high school stuff, even though I enjoyed it. But episode 2 is even better. I have a lot to say about that. It knocked the world building aspect of starting a show like this out of the park. The world building in episode 2 is incredible. I would actually recommend you go watch those episodes before watching these videos, or if you want to do the reverse, that's fine, but I would recommend, I'll put spoiler tags in the video, and you can, when you see those, I recommend stopping, because there are some real gut punches the show likes to throw. There was one plot line in episode 2 that frustrated me, but I will get to that in my own cover of that episode, which should already be live if you want to check it out. But thanks for watching, and I can't wait to see you in the next video.